Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leaders in Tech, the podcast that is shining a light on the wisdom and experiences of female leaders, paving the way for the next generation of women in tech leadership. Joining us today is Sharon O'Mara, a senior marketing executive and strategic advisor with extensive leadership experience. Sharon's remarkable journey spans over 25 years, during which she played a pivotal role in scaling iconic brands such as Apple and Adobe. Currently, Sharon is the co-founder of Corduroy Group, where she helps early-stage companies optimize their sales and marketing strategies. Today, we're going to be exploring her insights on intentional leadership, developing teams at a global scale, and how intention has been a North Star throughout her career. Sharon, I'm so glad to have you here to share your story with us.
Oh, thank you. I'm so honored to be here.
So to start off, I would love it if you could tell me about a female leader who has given you some sort of inspiration that you've used in your career.
It's interesting. In terms of female leadership, I've worked with a lot of really great women. I've seen women who are technical, who are great managers, business leaders. And I think I've learned something from all of them. I think they all have taught me how to be present in a room, how to feel like you can ask questions, how to stand up for what you believe in. So I think there are many that I've actually learned from and been inspired from, and actually to this day continue to be.
The main thing that we want to speak about today is about being intentional, and specifically splitting that up between being intentional as an individual and then also intentional leadership, which is a separate thing altogether. I thought where we could start would be by defining what we mean by being intentional. How would you explain that to somebody who, let's say, had no idea?
For me, intentional means what's my objective? Like, what am I trying to achieve? And that can constantly change. But I just think it's really important to use it as this idea of like, what's my goal, or what do I want to learn? What do I want to achieve, as a bit of a North Star, so that you can keep yourself on a path. One example might be, I want to learn how to do something really well inside of a company. And that can be why you work there. Or it could be you really want to help people grow and be their best selves inside of a company. That's another example. So that might be more of a manager role. But knowing what those intentions are help you keep focused when there's ups and downs, when there's great achievements, and also when there are harder obstacles in front of you. And it can also be a really great litmus test for, is this still working for me? Am I actually doing what I want to be doing, or am I in an environment that allows me to do what I want to be doing? So intention provides clarity that can help me continue to guide myself, but also team members or peers or people that I'm trying to mentor myself.
Yeah, you gave an example of a managerial intention, but when you look at intentional leadership, for example, how that's different to other leadership styles, and I guess why it's a powerful leadership style to adopt.
I think when you're a leader, it's important to understand that it's a bigger platform than just about you. And if you're a leader, you have responsibility to your team members, to their team members, to help everybody bring their best selves to the task at hand. And that's important to know, because if you have that mindset, for me at least, it helped me think, how do I structure a team? How do I think about where I put people so that they can actually be their best selves? And all of it has to kind of scaffold up into, what is the team itself really trying to achieve?
Yeah.
So that manager mindset around being a leader and being intentional is really, really important, because it's not just about you. You're really trying to bring a group of people along with you. And it's business too. Like you want to be able to achieve business objectives. It's not just about the people. It's about making sure that you're bringing the people along so they can do their best, but
Mhm.
do their best in the service of what the business objectives are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what kind of skills does somebody who wants to be an intentional leader need to have or develop?
As a leader, you need to know which direction you're heading. If you know the direction you're heading, understanding how to bring people along with you is very important. People won't just follow you to follow you. They need to believe in what the objective is. So your intention needs to be clear on this is the direction we're heading. This is why it's important. And making sure that that gets communicated well within the organization. As the leader, if you're there just to be there for the title or the promotion, the intention may backfire on actually getting the team to follow you. But as a leader, if you're thinking that it's my intention to be able to bring an organization or a group of people along with me to meet the business objectives and help them grow, then that works better because the intention is broader, it's more inclusive, and it's not just about you. It's about what the team needs to do, which is why I think, again, managing with intention has
Mhm.
to be really thoughtful. It's harder to do than just what do I need to do for myself. And there always needs to be check-in and refinements around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, when I'm thinking about some of the times when I've been in companies and it doesn't feel like things are necessarily cohesive, I've always put it down to not enough alignment to the company objectives, whereas teams maybe operating in silos or individuals not really knowing what they're working towards. And that can cause issues in terms of team performance. And actually, when I was just prepping for our conversation today, I read an article from Harvard Business School that indicated that ambiguity will have a direct correlation on that team performance. And that goes along with what you've kind of just mentioned there. So I suppose I'm interested to know from all of your experience how you make sure that those intentions and that waterfall effect are communicated well to your team and that everybody understands the goals that they're working towards.
Yeah, I think for a team, there's so many things that go into play here because as a leader, you have to be thinking about the business and you have to be thinking about the team. But then you also have to be taking into consideration what's the intention of all of those individuals? What are they aiming for? And that needs to be integrated. You need to know, can I help these individuals grow? Are we in a period of time where we may not be growing so that they have great upside in terms of promotion or title, but they have great upside in terms of opportunity? And it takes sort of an acute awareness to be able to integrate all the different moving parts because an individual might want to move faster than the organization does or than the company does. So you have to take a lot of this into consideration. And that's where I think as a manager or as a leader, you have to be clear on what's possible within the organization and also be realistic about it. You can't overpromise because then if you underdeliver, then that has a direct impact on the team. And I don't think that's where you're living in your integrity necessarily. So it's kind of a fine dance that I think is very important because when you have intention, there's that saying where, sometimes the best intentions, like they just don't bear out, right? Because the context around you, the world around you, isn't supporting of that. So I think it's very important to know that if you're within an organization, to be as clear as you possibly can around what what the business, what the organization will allow for, and to make
Yeah.
sure that there's context setting around that. while at the same time doing your best to motivate, give people the best opportunities that they can to shine and feel like they're doing really impactful work. And that's a constant dance that's happening. But I believe that leaders who are really successful can see that amongst their team and hopefully have the mindset that that's what they're working towards, to make sure that their team members feel like they're having an impact, they're
Mm.
making a difference, they're supporting the business, and that that's the first and foremost priority. And then if somebody wants to be able to move up inside of an organization or get promoted, those are constructs that different businesses set up. Sometimes it's easy to deliver on that expectation. And oftentimes, it's been my experience where it hasn't always been that easy. And sometimes I think that's a good thing, because then you get people who are really there trying to do the best work
Yeah.
instead of just trying to push a career based on promotions, instead of actually like what they're capable of or what they can, the impact they can have. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. And it resonates really well with me because the type of team that I run in my day job is entry level into sales. And, they all want to be promoted. And sometimes not necessarily even knowing what they want to be promoted into, just want to be promoted. And it's typically a high turnover team because I'd say most people are in the role for less than 2 years. So, yeah, I definitely can see how sometimes individual goals can be perceived to be more important than the company goals, which doesn't really align with building the right kind of mentality and environment that's actually going to serve them in the next role.
But I think that's an important point, though, because sometimes that is what people want to do. People do want to get promoted. They don't want to stay somewhere long, and they feel like they're being left behind if they're not. And that's their
Mm.
individual intention, right? And so if I think back
Yeah.
upon my career when I was, very young, it was about making sure you felt like you were having upward mobility, and
Hmm.
that was my
Hmm.
intention. So my intention at that time was to have that upward mobility. And when I ran into obstacles that were either because of management or maybe my skill set didn't match up perfectly, and I couldn't get that upward mobility, then I had to go do something different because my
Yeah.
goals or what I was thinking weren't aligned with where I was. And that can happen, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Because again, that goes back to whether you're the individual or the manager, hopefully you're going into it with a mindset of like, what do I really want out of this?
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm hearing that there could potentially be a conflict between a manager who is trying to be intentional about the company and the team goals, maybe trying to encourage the team to be intentional about their own goals, but they might not match.
Sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And you're depending upon the organization. It's sort of on both to understand like what's the world that we're dealing with? What does it look like? And do my intentions match up? And hopefully the manager, the leader is able to communicate pretty clearly. Here's the world
Yeah.
that we live in, and this is what's going to be. And, I've had team members who felt like they absolutely needed to move on, that they needed to do something different. And many times I was sad to see them go, but it was
Yeah.
understandable because we weren't aligned. I wasn't able to give them what they needed, and the organization was no longer serving them.
And I think sometimes that's what's best for them. I've definitely had people
100%.
who are great people, but in a role that is not, it's just not right for them at that time. Usually because they've been in the role for a while and they're fed up of doing it. I mean, I run teams to make cold calls. So, although there are some people actually more nowadays who want to do it for life, but it's typically not.
Yeah.
And I've seen people who I've had to, at times, exit them from the business just because it's not working right. And then they've gone on, changed career paths, and they're thriving. And that's sometimes the best thing for somebody is a hard decision.
Right. in that case, they're taking care of themselves, right? I mean, they're actually going on and manifesting what they need on their intention side, right? Which is, I think, the hard part about being a leader sometimes is that you can't do that all the time, and you have to be okay with that. You can do your best to make sure that you're serving, again, if your intention is to serve a team and to do well by your people, then that's easier to try and maneuver. Sometimes if your goal is to just continue yourself to move up that ladder, you can leave team members behind.
You've mentioned about being for your team. That sounds much more conducive to positive leadership and creating a great environment than serving your own promotions, which are two separate intentions.
It works better if you're not thinking about what your next career achievement is and you're thinking like, we're all in this together, then that makes it easier to bring a team along.
Having the ability to think about the team and do everything that you just said, do you think that potentially comes from a place of you're more established? You've got some of the goals that you wanted in your life already set. They're there. You've got credibility in the market. So even if it all goes wrong, you're in a very stable position.
I guess what I would have said to my younger self is, which felt better? Did it feel better to be the person who was dragging people along, being utterly ruthless with it, or did it feel better to to care more holistically about the organization? And it's definitely not lost on me that that comes with confidence, that comes with stability. And there's a part of me, though, that believes that strong leaders who actually believe in their team will succeed, even if you're fairly junior in your organization. Like that will be, it will be okay. I really do believe that.
Do you think if earlier on in your career you spoke to yourself and you did operate in this way, do you think you still would have had the career path at that pace that you did?
I don't know if it was a really, fast pace. There were ups and downs and, two steps back, one step forward, but it's very hard to say whether I would have or not. But what I would say to people who are listening and thinking through this is where intention comes into place, which is there was a turning point in my career after some not great steps or things that I really wish I could take back or do differently, where I really realized there were people here that really mattered. And when I just kind of took that step, it was so much more rewarding because then it felt like something bigger than me. And it felt like I was able to tap into not only my skill sets, but see other people's skill sets in a completely different way, which I think was beneficial not only to the organization, but to the business as well. But that took a moment. That took some missteps of interacting with people to get me to that place, to realize how much more fulfilling it was for me, at least with my intention of how I wanted to show up in the world and be. It took some things that I would 100% redo to get to that place where my intention was, I want to grow an organization. I want to take great care of people. I want to let people do their best work and really see who they can be inside of an organization that's having an impact on the business.
Absolutely. So for people who are listening now, then, let's say brand new to setting intentions, never done it before, what would you say is the first step in starting that process of defining their intentions?
To your earlier point, I think it's deeply personal. I think it's really deeply personal. And again, I think for some people, it might be that they have a great idea or they want to build something, right? And they want to bring along people to do that. It might be that they just deeply care about managing people and getting people to grow and, see success, like be that mentor. Some people might decide that, they're aiming for a particular job or title, and they're going to go for it. So I think you have to think about, how do you want to be in the business? What are you trying to achieve? And nobody can answer that except for you. And then I would also say, you have to give yourself some opportunity to change, because you may have decided, like, I want that really senior title, but as it turns out, once I kind of get close to it, I'm not all that interested in it. And now what I'd rather do is, so I think it takes an understanding of, what do I think I want? Why do I think I want it? How does it make me feel? And then when I start to implement it, do a check-in. Does this feel right? Am I going home happy? Am I, waking up in the middle of the night stressed about it? It's all those things about when people say to you, like, how do you want to be in the world? It's like a microcosm of, like, how do you want to be in business? You want to have an impact. How do you want that impact to look? What does it mean to the people around you? And that evaluation around it constantly happening, I think, is healthy. And I think will also help people along the way do a better job, potentially, of plotting out their paths, or even their skill sets, how they impact other people.
Yeah. Would you say that you think there's maybe an optimal frequency that people should review and adapt or adjust their intentions?
For me, I could feel in my gut, like, when something was going right or something wasn't going right. And then I would really want to do a check-in on, like, what's causing that. Right. And so I could go weeks on certain times, and then other times it might be daily. I do think it's probably worthwhile, depending upon where you are in your career, to be checking that out. If it's, maybe it's like once a month, is this heading in the right direction? Is this going where I think it needs to go? Or sometimes you need a longer runway to really gather enough information or data that you can actually ingest and think about, and then say, oh, it might take a quarter, it might take 6 months to actually do that. But it's probably more important to listen to yourself and that voice inside of you, or feeling inside of you, however you represent that, and ask, why is this coming up for me? Why am I thinking about this? And it could be because it's really great and it feels good. I need to note that. Like, just because something feels, it's not just the bad stuff. Like, this feels really good. You kind of can tell when you're in the flow of something feeling really good. Why is that? What's happening? In addition to, this feels a little bit off, or it's causing me a little bit of anxiety. Why is that? What's happening? And how to course correct. That listening to yourself.
They call it the Sunday scaries. If you start getting the Sunday scaries again, then that's an indication.
Well, sometimes the Sunday scaries, it's also I've watched many people who, it's kind of excitement too. Is it a combination of fear and excitement? Well, that's really good. If it's really getting you down, that's something to pay attention to. I think it's probably absolutely unavoidable to never have that. It's just, that's life, right? There will be times when it's just going along great, and other times when you're hitting bumps, and you just have to understand the frequency of the bumps, and if they're intermittent and that feels okay, or if it's like constant. Those are the signals you want to be paying attention to.
Yeah, is it debilitating, or is it actually just getting you a little bit fired up and showing you that you care about the week ahead, and care about maybe the presentation you're doing, or whatever it is that's giving you that feeling?
I totally agree with you. It's a great example. It's okay to be nervous about a presentation and be a little bit afraid of it, and wish you could still be at the beach on a Sunday or Monday, but it shows you care, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously sometimes in business, but also in life, things are difficult and challenges get in the way of maybe your usual flow. And that's normal, I think, very normal and natural to have like a fluctuating level of motivation as you go through life. Can you maybe share about how being intentional has or could help someone to avoid those dips in motivation and kind of bring you back to the path that you were on?
Yeah, I actually had a senior VP that I worked with who truly believed that you couldn't maintain balance, and what you could have is priorities. So that's actually like a really interesting thing to think about, which is I can't actually keep my work and life in balance
Mhm.
because my kids might be going into high school and I need to focus in on that, or work has a launch that I need to pay attention to. And those two things, if they're happening at the same time, would be incredibly conflicting, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's about understanding where the priority lies. It's a matter of, is the priority that's happening for me right now on the work side taking up too much time? Is there an end in sight? And then I can get back to maybe slightly, a balance around it. And those are the types of things you need to evaluate. I have nieces who are very early on in their careers and really trying to understand, like, how do they establish a community in a whole new city, but also care deeply about their job. And so her priority might not be really around community as much as it is right now establishing herself in that job. But then she has to make a decision, at what point does she want to pull back and
Yeah.
say, all right, I'm going to do a little bit of a reprioritization and now build into community.
Yeah.
And again, those are the sorts of decisions that really only you can make. But it's fair to question, is all this time at work giving me everything that I want? Is that intention still working for me? Or has it run its course and now I need to think about something new? Those are
Yeah.
the sorts of questions I think you need to be asking yourself, and they're constantly changing, constantly
Yeah.
changing.
And I suppose, would building a community in the place that I've just recently moved to actually give me more fulfillment outside of work, make me feel better from
Right,
a mental health perspective? Would I then go and do better work because I have that
right.
outside of work?
And that's an interesting point as a leader. I had a VP once that I worked for, and they would send out emails at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it sets a tone within the organization that, is your intention there to make people stand up and feel like they always have to be running? And does that bring out the best in
Mm.
people? I didn't think it did. And I learned that lesson sort of fairly early on from that
Yeah.
person. So those are the types of behaviors and tone that you can set, because your intention might be to just be people pleasing, do it all right all the time. And then you have to sort of say, is that really what I want to set out there in the world for
Mhm.
my teams? Or is that how I want to be in business? And for some people that will work. And for me, it didn't. But I
Yeah.
had to learn that, right?
Yeah, of course. It's always interesting, isn't it? When schedule send is an option, does it need to be sent at 2? Is there a strategy behind that?
Right.
They kind of
Unless you're
mm,
traveling and you're on just opposite sides
time
of the
zone.
world, then it's totally fine. But when you're
Yeah.
both in the same city and that's happening, I think you have to question. So my intention, one of the things I learned is I didn't want to be like that. One, because I don't perform well at 2, 3 in the morning from a work perspective, but that wasn't the personality of the team that I wanted to set up.
So, how can a leader look at their team and identify that they need to reconnect with their motivations, or identify an area where somebody might need to review that priority that we were speaking about before?
If you've set sort of the right tone within the team, sometimes the team will just tell you. Uh, I had members of my team say to me, this isn't sustainable, or this needs to be fixed. And you need to be able to hear it. It's not easy to hear. If your intention is to have a team that feels like they're moving forward, you also don't want to feel like you're browbeating them. But you would hear it from people, or they would come in and say something needs to change here. So that happens because you've got strong leaders who feel like they can come in and give you feedback. And that was sort of an intention. Can you hear the feedback? Can you ingest it? Can you take that? Sometimes you can't move on it. You can't make changes, but you can try and do adjustments as appropriate.
I think it always goes back to the relationship that you have with your people. I'm a big fan of Radical Candor. I don't know whether that's a book that you've read, but if you have the right relationship with people, they can just tell you, and really
Yeah.
straightforward to tell you this is what's going on. They know it's a safe space to voice those concerns or
Yeah.
raise their hand up when they need support.
Yeah. And definitely have it. It's just not always possible to act on it. And I think for me, that's when I began to get out of sync with thinking and where I currently am. If I can't protect a team, or if I can't make things like, am I now intentionally where I want to be?
Right.
And back to my very early point, sometimes the organization just can't accommodate. And then you need to make a decision as to whether or not you want to be, if your intentions can be modified, or do they feel too compromised?
Yeah, that's so interesting actually, because as a leader, when you start thinking about what's best for your team, then that becomes a lot more clear as to whether you can actually remove barriers or enable them in the way that is required. And if you can't,
Right.
as a leader, what can you do? Are you leading?
Are you leading? I think that's a really relevant question. And back to sort of radical candor, it might be, I'm actually not. I'm not being successful in doing this. And there's some hard truths that have to come through there as well, right?
Yeah, job title might feel successful. Conversations with your boss about getting a promotion might feel successful, but actually, if your North Star is to support the team in the best possible way and get the most out of them for their future and their career, and you can't do that, then I suppose it's all a facade, how successful you really are.
Well, it might be that somebody else can come in and do a better job of it. I
Yeah,
mean, that's a reality too, right? Which is you're not able to be the leader that you want to be inside of that organization, or whatever it is, but somebody else may come in and be quite successful at it.
yeah,
And that's okay, because again, from my perspective, that's part of the journey, right? Which is sometimes you overstay your welcome, or you're no longer having the impact that you need to be able to have. And I've always found that when you fight that too long, it goes from not good to even worse.
so it's very good to notice that early on and not let that outstaying happen.
Yeah. And again, I think listening to your team is so important. And like, always know that your intentions of what you want to be achieving should be constantly moving. They should be evolving, because you get more information. You get more
Mm,
information around what it takes to be successful to support the business, what makes you feel like you could be successful, where your strengths lie, where your strengths don't lie. That's good. That means
yeah.
that you're evolving as a person if you're able to listen to all of that. And I believe most of your listeners will find that over time, where they started with their intention changes radically, or there's
Mm,
multiple versions of it. Maybe they'll come back to it, but it should be something that they're constantly evaluating and thinking about and trying to refine and listen to.
yeah, I would say that's probably going to be my biggest takeaway today. I came in with this preconception that when you set a goal, you should be working at it for probably a much longer period of time. And when I asked you how often someone should review it, I thought you might say once a year, but it sounds like it's
No,
much, much more frequent than that, which is good, because if it's truly what you're working towards, it should flit in and out of everything you do, maybe on a subconscious level, but yeah, that's a big takeaway. And my second big takeaway is reflecting in the times when things are going well, because I do think that people, me personally, I don't speak for everybody. I personally find myself reflecting a lot more when things are not going well, and when they are going well,
Mm,
just like plowing on and not taking the
sure.
time to think, why is this going well? What's positive? Let me unpack this so that I can recreate it on a different project or in a different team environment. So I think that's a huge takeaway for me today.
Yeah, I believe that that's really important. I think you can feel in your body that, again, sort of that positive energy, that flow of this is feeling like it's heading in the right direction. And
Mm.
that is important to the individual as much as it is to the team and the organization.
Yeah. So before we go, we have one final question, which we actually ask to all of our guests. What is the best piece of advice that you have received from a leader in tech?
There's something about being yourself, trying to make sure that you're not split of how you should be, like as an individual and what you think you should be doing at work. That trying to keep that whole is best for you, the organization, and the business. And it works best for you to not burn out, to
Mm.
actually be in your flow of what really works best for you, and then can permeate throughout, the organization or your team. So really trying to show up as yourself
Yeah,
is the best advice I ever got.
that's really good. Also, it's just absolutely exhausting to be playing a persona all the time. So you could
Yeah,
not possibly be doing your best work.
true. But we also get taught to read the room and try and accommodate.
Yeah,
But there's a balance there of like, what do you think is the right thing to do? Like, who do you want to be in that room?
yeah,
And
yeah,
hopefully it's like really reflective of who you are.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
I think we've really gone into the depths of this topic. I'm going to take a moment to go away, reflect on what my intentions are. I'm hoping that other people who are listening will do the same thing. Thank you so much for highlighting some of the concepts to think about when we're identifying those intentions, and also motivational gaps and how we can use it to bring ourselves back to the original why and that North Star. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate you taking the
Thanks,
time.
Emily. I'm so honored. Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Lead Hers in Tech. Your support means the world to us, and we're incredibly grateful for the opportunity to share these empowering stories with you. If you're listening on a podcast platform and you believe in our mission to amplify the voices of women in tech, please take a moment to leave us a rating. It really helps us grow and reach more listeners. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with others. Anyone watching on YouTube, engagement makes a big difference, so please subscribe to our channels and give this episode a like and share. If you resonated with any of the topics today or have some similar experiences, then we want to hear from you in the comments section. Let's keep the conversation going. Your contribution is not just a favour, it's a powerful step towards change. Remember, every story shared and every voice heard can ignite a spark in someone's career. So, if you know an amazing woman with a story that needs to be heard, please nominate them. Thanks again for listening and for being part of this journey.